A fierce, snarling dog that terrifies everyone in town is caged, feared, and written off as untouchable. But one small girl steps forward, unafraid, reaching out her hand where no one else dares, and something extraordinary happens. Suddenly, the town is watching, divided between fear and awe, while whispers of hidden secrets start to surface. The dog isn't just aggressive, it's guarding something no one understands yet. Powerful forces will try to stop her, authorities will doubt her, and danger lurks closer than anyone imagines. Can a child's courage and a dog's loyalty reveal a truth that could change everything? And what will happen when the very thing everyone fears turns out to be the key to justice? Through the kitchen window, Callista watched her daughter skip up the driveway, auburn hair bouncing with each step. Her heart had nearly stopped when Mrs. Peterson from 3 houses down had rushed over, phone in hand, showing her the video that was already spreading through their neighborhood group chat. "Look what your Juniper did!" Mrs. Peterson had exclaimed, her voice shaking. "That's Whitmore's monster dog!" Now, as Juniper burst through the door with bright eyes and rosy cheeks, Callista took a deep breath. "Baby, we need to talk about what happened today." "Mom, you won't believe it!" Juniper kicked off her sneakers, leaving them in a jumbled heap by the door. "Everyone says Hellion is super mean, but he's not. He's just scared and lonely." Callista guided her daughter to the kitchen table, where a plate of apple slices waited. "I saw the video, sweetheart. What you did was very dangerous." She tried to keep her voice steady, though her hands shook slightly as she sat down. "But Mom, you always say we should trust our feelings." Juniper grabbed an apple slice and spoke around it. "And my feelings said he wasn't bad. Honey, that dog has hurt people before. Mr. Whitmore keeps him as a guard dog." "That's what everyone says." Juniper's lower lip trembled slightly. "But they don't know him like I do. When I looked in his eyes, Mom, he was crying inside." Callista's phone buzzed again. Another notification. She glanced at it briefly. The video had made it to the town's Facebook page. Comments were pouring in, ranging from praise for Juniper's bravery to harsh criticism of her parenting. "The whole town's talking about it," Callista said softly. "Mrs. Peterson showed me the video." Juniper's eyes lit up. "Really? Did you see how he calmed down when I touched him? It was like magic." Despite her worry, Callista couldn't help but notice the truth in her daughter's words. The video showed the massive German Shepherd's transformation from snarling threat to gentle giant at her daughter's touch. It was remarkable and terrifying. "I named him Bronte," Juniper announced proudly, "because of those books you read, the ones by the sisters. He looks sad like their stories sometimes." A knock at the door made them both jump. Through the window, Callista could see Bob Werner, the town's animal control officer, standing on their porch. Her stomach tightened. "Stay here," she told Juniper, moving to answer the door. "Mrs. Hale?" Bob nodded, his usually friendly face serious. "We need to discuss what happened today. That dog has a history." Juniper appeared beside her mother, despite being told to stay put. "His name is Bronte now," she said firmly, "and he's not bad." Bob's expression softened as he looked at the little girl. "Listen, sweetheart, I know you meant well, but that dog, Bronte, he's been trained to be aggressive. Mr. Whitmore uses him to guard his property." "Then why does he keep him in that tiny cage?" Juniper demanded, her small hands balling into fists. "He looks so sad in there." Callista placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder, feeling the tension in her small frame. The video was still circulating, phones all over town lighting up with notifications. In the background, she could hear Mrs. Peterson's voice carrying across the yard as she talked to another neighbor about the shocking incident. "The thing is," Bob continued, We've had 3 complaints about that dog in the past month alone. People are scared, and now with this video going around, he won't hurt anyone, Juniper insisted. He just needs someone to be nice to him. Callista studied her daughter's face, the absolute certainty in those green eyes, the determined set of her jaw. She'd seen that look before, when Juniper had insisted on nursing a wounded bird back to health, or when she'd spent weeks gaining the trust of the nervous stray cat that lived behind the grocery store. I understand everyone's concerned, Callista said carefully, but maybe my daughter sees something we don't. Bob shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Hale, I respect your opinion, but that dog is dangerous. Mr. Whitmore's already called, demanding we keep people away from his property. He's the dangerous one, Juniper muttered, just loud enough to be heard. The evening air filled with the sounds of gathering neighbors, their worried voices carrying across lawns. Through the growing crowd, Callista could see phones raised, recording the scene at her door, turning her front porch into an impromptu stage for the town's latest drama. I promise I'll keep her away from the farm, Callista told Bob, even as her daughter's face fell. But maybe we need to look closer at how that dog is being treated. Bob nodded slowly, understanding passing between the adults. I'll keep an eye on the situation, he said carefully. In the meantime, please be careful, both of you. As he walked away, Callista closed the door on the curious faces and worried whispers. Juniper stood in the hallway, small but determined, her faith in the misunderstood dog unwavering. Mom, she said quietly, sometimes the scariest things are just the most scared things. Callista pulled her daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent of sunshine and strawberry shampoo. Outside, the town buzzed with the day's events, but in here, she held her brave, intuitive little girl and wondered if, perhaps, Juniper's heart saw clearer than all their cautious adult eyes combined. The town hall meeting erupted into chaos as Mayor Thompson banged his gavel. Order, please, everyone! The video of Juniper and the German Shepherd played on the large screen behind him, causing another wave of gasps and angry murmurs. Callista sat rigid in her metal folding chair, watching dozens of neighbors point and whisper. That dog is a menace, shouted George Peterson from the back. My grandson walks past that farm to get to school. It should have been put down months ago, agreed Sarah Mitchell, the local veterinarian. We can't wait until someone gets hurt. Bob Werner, the animal control officer, stood at the podium. The dog has shown consistent aggressive behavior. Mr. Whitmore claims it's necessary for protecting his property, but given recent events... Recent events, Mrs. Thompson interrupted. You mean a little girl putting her hand through the fence? That's not an event. That's a near tragedy. Callista's hands trembled in her lap. Next to her, Juniper sat straight-backed, her small face set with determination. She'd insisted on coming, even though Callista had tried to shield her from this. Bronte isn't bad, Juniper said suddenly, her clear voice cutting through the noise. The room fell silent. He's scared and lonely. Nobody's ever been nice to him before. Mayor Thompson's face softened slightly. Sweetheart, I know you mean well, but this isn't about being nice. This is about public safety. The girl's right. The deep voice came from the back of the room. Heads turned to see a tall, broad-shouldered man with salt and pepper hair standing up. Callista recognized him vaguely, Lyle Rembeck, the retired K-9 officer who lived on the edge of town. I've worked with aggressive German Shepherds for 20 years, Lyle continued, walking toward the front. What I saw in that video wasn't aggression. It was learned behavior breaking down in the face of genuine kindness. With all due respect, Mr. Rembeck, Bob Werner said, this dog has a history. So did half the dogs I rehabilitated, Lyle countered. Dogs aren't born vicious. They're made that way. Juniper beamed, while Callista felt a flutter of hope. Finally, someone who understood. "That's all very nice," Mayor Thompson said, "but we can't risk—" "Risk what?" Lyle interrupted. "The dog's contained. And from what I saw, the only person who's managed to get close enough to be in danger is sitting right there." He nodded toward Juniper. "And that dog didn't hurt her. That tells me something." The meeting dissolved into heated arguments. Callista watched as neighbors she'd known for years demanded immediate action, their faces twisted with fear and anger. Mr. Whitmore wasn't even present to defend his dog, though his absence spoke volumes. Later, as they walked to their car, Lyle approached them. Up close, his weathered face showed years of experience, but his eyes were kind. "That was brave of you," he said to Juniper. "Speaking up like that." Juniper smiled. "You believe me about Bronte?" "I believe in giving dogs a chance," Lyle replied carefully. "But you need to be smart about it. No more reaching through fences without supervision." Callista stepped forward. "Mr. Rem Beck." "Lyle," he corrected. "Lyle, thank you for speaking up in there. Everyone else thinks we're crazy." He shrugged. "People fear what they don't understand. But that dog—" He paused, considering his words. "I've been watching from my truck. Park it down the road sometimes. That dog shows signs of anxiety, not aggression. The barking, the pacing, it's fear-based behavior." Juniper nodded enthusiastically. "That's what I thought. He just needs friends." "Tell you what," Lyle said, looking at Callista for permission. "I'll keep an eye on things from a distance. Give you some pointers about reading his body language, but you have to promise to be careful." Over the next few days, Juniper visited Bronte under Lyle's distant supervision. She never entered the property but sat near the fence, reading books aloud while the dog gradually moved closer to listen. Each day, his aggressive displays grew shorter, until sometimes he would simply lie near the fence, his ears perked toward her voice. Callista watched it all with a mixture of pride and terror. The neighbors hadn't let up. Mrs. Peterson crossed the street when she saw them coming, and someone had left a newspaper article about dog attacks in their mailbox. But she couldn't deny the change in the dog's behavior, or the way her daughter's quiet confidence seemed to grow with each visit. One afternoon, as Juniper read Charlotte's Web to Bronte, Lyle pulled up in his truck beside Callista. "She's got a gift," he said quietly, watching through binoculars. "Most adults spend years learning what she does naturally." "What's that?" "Patience, understanding, the ability to see past the surface." He lowered the binoculars. "That dog's been waiting for someone like her." Callista watched her daughter turn a page, her voice carrying clearly in the afternoon air. Bronte lay with his head on his paws, watching Juniper with alert but calm eyes. The transformation was remarkable, even if most of the town refused to see it. "The mayor's still pushing for action," Callista said. "They're talking about forced removal, maybe even—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Lyle nodded grimly. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, let's focus on documenting the dog's behavior changes. Build our case." The sound of Juniper's laughter floated over to them. Bronte had rolled onto his back, exposing his belly to the sun while she read. It was hard to believe this was the same dog that had terrorized the town just days ago. "Sometimes," Lyle said, "it just takes one person, willing to look deeper. Your daughter might be 8 years old, but she's teaching this whole town a lesson about judgment and fear." Callista smiled, watching her brave, compassionate little girl work her magic on the dog everyone else had given up on. The town's judgment still stung, but with Lyle's support and Juniper's unwavering conviction, she felt stronger. They would face whatever came next together. A sleek, black SUV pulled up to the curb, its tires crunching on loose gravel. Grant Whitmore stepped out, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the dusty farm road. His presence seemed to darken the afternoon air. "What's going on here?" His voice cut through the peaceful scene. Bronte's ears immediately flattened against his head, and he backed away from the fence. Juniper noticed the change in the dog's demeanor. The relaxed animal who had been listening to her stories vanished, replaced by the tense, fearful creature she'd first met. "Mr. Whitmore," Lyle said, stepping forward, "we're observing the dog's behavior patterns." "Without permission? On my property?" Whitmore's face reddened. "That dog is dangerous. He's a guard dog, not some pet for a little girl to play with." Juniper stood up, her book clutched to her chest. "He's not dangerous. He's scared." Whitmore turned his cold gaze on her. "What would you know about it? You're just a child playing games that could get someone hurt." "She knows more than you think," Lyle interjected. "I've been watching too. That dog shows clear signs of—" "I don't care what signs you think you see," Whitmore snapped. He pulled out his phone and started dialing. "I'm calling animal control right now. This has gone on long enough." "Wait," Juniper's voice rang out, surprisingly strong. "Please, just watch him for a minute. Look how he acts when you're not here versus when you are." Whitmore paused, his finger hovering over the phone. "Give us 2 weeks," Lyle proposed, seizing the moment. "Let us document his behavior. If we're wrong, we'll back off. But if we're right, wouldn't you rather have a well-behaved guard dog than one that's acting out of fear?" Callista stepped closer to her daughter, protective but proud. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. 1 week, Whitmore said finally, his jaw tight. "But you stay outside the fence. And if that dog shows any sign of aggression, he's gone. Understood?" Juniper nodded solemnly. "Yes, sir." As Whitmore stormed back to his SUV, Bronte slowly crept forward again, his posture still tense but curious. Juniper sat back down, opened her book, and began reading again, as if nothing had happened. "That was quite a stand you took," Lyle said quietly, joining her by the fence. He pulled out a small notebook. "Now, let's start documenting everything we see. Every reaction, every change in body language." Over the next few hours, they created a detailed log. When delivery trucks passed, Bronte would bark and pace. But his aggression seemed defensive, rather than offensive. He'd place himself between perceived threats and Juniper's position. "See how he keeps checking on you?" Lyle pointed out. "That's not aggression. That's protection instinct being channeled the wrong way." Word spread through the town about the standoff with Whitmore. Some neighbors drove by slowly, watching with disapproval. Others stopped to observe from a distance, curiosity winning over fear. Mrs. Martinez from the bakery brought them cookies one afternoon. "My Fernando was so scared of that dog," she admitted, watching Bronte doze peacefully near the fence. "But maybe we were all too quick to judge." Not everyone was convinced. A group of concerned parents started a petition to have Bronte removed immediately. The local paper ran an editorial about public safety versus personal rights. But Juniper remained focused on her mission. She and Lyle developed a system for tracking Bronte's triggers and responses. They noted how his aggressive displays decreased when approached calmly, how he responded to different tones of voice, how his body language shifted between genuine threat response and learned behavior. "What I don't understand," Lyle said on the third day, frowning at his notes, "is why Whitmore seems so invested in maintaining the dog's aggressive reputation. A properly trained guard dog should be discerning, not indiscriminately hostile." Juniper looked up from where she sat, cross-legged in the grass. "Maybe he doesn't want people near his farm?" Lyle's eyes narrowed thoughtfully, but he just nodded and continued writing. The week stretched out before them, each day a race against time to prove what Juniper had known from the first moment, that beneath the snarls and the reputation, Bronte was a dog worthy of understanding and patience. The stakes were clear. Failure meant losing him to whatever fate Whitmore had planned. But for now, in the warm afternoon sun, a little girl read stories to a supposedly dangerous dog, while a retired canine officer kept watch and took notes, building a case for compassion over fear, understanding over judgment, and the wisdom that sometimes comes from the most unexpected sources. Lyle knelt by the fence, his experienced eyes studying Bronte's movements. The German Shepherd had settled into a routine over the past few days, pacing his territory, checking on Juniper, and responding to various stimuli. But something about his behavior pattern nagged at Lyle's professional instincts. "Juniper, watch how he moves when he thinks no one's looking," Lyle said quietly, making another note in his weathered notebook. Juniper looked up from her latest book. She'd taken to bringing a different one each day. "He favors his right side sometimes, especially when he first gets up." Lyle nodded, impressed by her observation. "That's right. And see those marks along his neck? Those aren't normal wear patterns." Through the chain-link fence, they could see irregular patches where Bronte's fur grew in different directions. When the sun hit just right, thin white lines became visible beneath the thick coat. "Someone hurt him?" Juniper's voice trembled with concern. "Maybe, but these aren't random injuries." Lyle pulled out his phone and zoomed in on a photo he'd taken earlier. "See this pattern here? That's from specialized training equipment. I used to see similar marks on police dogs that went through intensive security training." As if aware they were discussing him, Bronte approached the fence. His movements were measured, precise, nothing like the wild aggression everyone feared. He sat, maintaining eye contact with Lyle. "Hey there, big fellow," Lyle said softly. "You've got quite a story to tell, don't you?" That's when he noticed it, a slight bump under the skin near Bronte's shoulder blade. Most people would have missed it, but Lyle had worked with enough service dogs to recognize an implanted chip. "This is no ordinary guard dog," he muttered. "He's had professional training, high-level stuff." Mrs. Chen from the local grocery store slowed her car as she drove past, like many townspeople had taken to doing. This time, instead of hurrying by, she parked and approached cautiously. "I brought some leftover meat from the deli," she said, holding up a paper bag. Is it safe to give him some?" Juniper beamed. "He's really gentle when he takes treats. Want to see?" Under Lyle's supervision, they demonstrated how Bronte would sit, wait patiently, and accept food with careful manners. Mrs. Chen's eyes widened. "But everyone says he's so dangerous," she said, watching the dog politely take a piece of roast beef. "That's what they want people to think," Lyle replied, his voice heavy with suspicion. Just then, Whitmore's black SUV came roaring up the drive. Bronte's demeanor changed instantly. His body went rigid, hackles raised. But Lyle noticed something crucial. The dog's eyes kept darting between Whitmore and a specific corner of the property. "Get that crowd out of here!" Whitmore shouted, slamming his car door. "This isn't some circus show!" Mrs. Chen hurried back to her car, but Juniper stood her ground. "We're allowed to be here for another 3 days," she said firmly. "You agreed." Whitmore's face darkened. "I've filed a formal complaint with Animal Control. That beast is a menace, and I've got documentation to prove it." "Funny thing about documentation," Lyle interjected, rising slowly to his full height. "I've got some interesting notes myself, about specialized training marks, security implants, and behavior patterns that suggest professional conditioning." For a split second, Whitmore's confident facade cracked. His eyes darted to the same corner of the property Bronte had been watching. "Those are serious accusations, Mr. Rembeck," Whitmore said, his voice dangerously low. "I'd be careful about spreading rumors." "Not rumors," Juniper piped up. "We have pictures, and Bronte's getting better every day. He even learned to sit for Mrs. Chen." "Bronte?" Whitmore scoffed. "You named it?" "He needed a proper name," Juniper said. "Not just hellion or beast." As they argued, Lyle noticed something else. Every time Whitmore raised his voice, Bronte's reaction seemed almost rehearsed, like he was following learned behaviors rather than acting on natural instinct. A small crowd had gathered at a safe distance, watching the confrontation. Among them, Juniper's mother, Callista, stood with her arms crossed, ready to intervene if needed. "This dog isn't naturally aggressive," Lyle announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "He's been trained to respond to specific triggers. The question is why?" Whitmore's face flushed red. "Get off my property. All of you. I'm calling the police." "We're on public property," Lyle reminded him calmly, "and I think the police might be very interested in examining those security implants." After Whitmore stormed off, Juniper sat close to the fence. Bronte approached her slowly, his posture relaxed again. He pressed his nose through the chain links, letting her scratch his muzzle. "You're a good boy," she whispered. "We'll figure out what happened to you." Lyle watched them interact, his mind racing through years of K9 training experience. The dog's responses were too specific, too controlled. Someone had invested considerable time and resources into training him, not just as a guard dog, but for something more complex. "Juniper," he said softly, "I need you to keep doing exactly what you've been doing. Reading to him, staying calm, being consistent. You're helping him remember how to be a normal dog again." She nodded solemnly, already opening her book. As she read, Bronte lay down, his head resting on his paws, but his eyes remained alert, protecting his young friend while finding comfort in her presence. The gathered townspeople began to disperse, their whispers carrying a new tone, not of fear, but of curiosity and concern. Something wasn't adding up about Whitmore's story, and Bronte might be the key to understanding what was really happening at the farm. Sarah Martinez adjusted her press badge, squinting through her camera lens at Bronte. The local journalist had covered plenty of small-town stories, but none quite like this. "So you're telling me this vicious dog lets an 8-year-old read to him?" she asked, keeping her distance despite the fence between them. "Watch," Juniper said confidently, settling down with her worn copy of Charlotte's Web. Dr. Rachel Wong, the veterinarian who'd agreed to examine Bronte, stood beside Lyle. Her initial skepticism had faded after witnessing several of Juniper's interactions with the dog. "The scarring patterns are consistent with professional training equipment," Dr. Wong explained quietly. "But some of these marks, they're excessive. Whoever did this wasn't just training him, they were conditioning him." Callista wrapped her arms around herself, watching her daughter read aloud. Bronte lay near the fence, his amber eyes fixed on Juniper with an intensity that would have seemed threatening if not for his relaxed posture. "And see here?" Lyle pointed to specific areas on his detailed sketches. "The implant location suggests military or high-end private security applications. This isn't your typical guard dog setup." Sarah's pen moved rapidly across her notepad. "But why would Whitmore need that level of security on a farm?" "That's what we need to figure out," Callista said, "before he succeeds in having Bronte put down." Dr. Wong approached the fence cautiously, her medical kit in hand. "Juniper, honey, can you ask Bronte to come closer? I need to document these injuries properly." Juniper looked up from her book. "Bronte, come say hi to Dr. Wong. She's going to help you feel better." The German shepherd's ears twitched. He rose slowly, moving toward the fence with measured steps. Sarah's camera clicked rapidly, capturing the moment. "Good boy," Juniper encouraged. "She's nice, just like Mrs. Chen." Dr. Wong knelt carefully, speaking in soft, professional tones. "The response to verbal cues is remarkable. Most traumatized dogs wouldn't be this controlled." Through the fence, she began cataloging visible injuries, while Juniper kept reading, her young voice steady and soothing. Bronte remained still, though his muscles tensed when the vet's fingers found particularly sensitive areas. "These aren't random fight wounds," Dr. Wong announced. "Someone deliberately—" The rumble of an approaching vehicle cut her off. Whitmore's black SUV appeared, followed by a police cruiser. "Everyone stay calm," Lyle advised, stepping forward. "We're conducting a legitimate investigation." Officer Peters stepped out of his cruiser, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Whitmore has filed a harassment complaint. Says you're interfering with his private property." "I'm here on professional business," Sarah spoke up, holding up her press credentials. "Documenting a story of public interest." "And I'm conducting a medical examination," Dr. Wong added, displaying her veterinary license. "We have concerns about animal abuse." Whitmore's face contorted with rage. "This is ridiculous. That dog is dangerous and you're all trespassing." "We're on public property," Callista reminded him, her voice firm, "and we have documentation of suspicious injuries and behavior patterns." Juniper hadn't stopped reading, maintaining Bronte's calm despite the tension. The dog's eyes tracked Whitmore's movements, but he stayed beside her, choosing comfort over confrontation. "Officer Peters," Lyle said quietly, "I'd like to formally report evidence of potential criminal activity. These injuries and the security implant suggest this dog was used for more than simple farm protection." Sarah's camera continued clicking, capturing Whitmore's changing expressions. "This is harassment," Whitmore shouted. "I want them arrested." "Sir, officers," Peters replied carefully. "They're not breaking any laws, and if they have evidence of animal abuse—" "It's all lies," Whitmore snarled. "That dog is violent and needs to be put down before it hurts someone." "Really?" Sarah interrupted, reviewing her camera screen. "Because I have about 50 photos showing otherwise, including quite a few of those suspicious scars Dr. Wong mentioned." Juniper finally looked up from her book. "Bronte only gets scary when you're here, Mr. Whitmore. Why is that?" The simple question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Officer Peters shifted his weight, looking between the gathered group and the increasingly agitated Whitmore. "I'll need to file reports on all of this," he said finally. "Both the harassment complaint and the abuse allegations." "Perfect," Sarah smiled. "And I'll need your name for my article about concerned citizens investigating suspicious activities at Whitmore Farm." Whitmore stormed back to his SUV, but not before shooting a venomous look at the group. "You have no idea what you're getting into," he warned. After he peeled away, Dr. Wong finished her examination, while Sarah interviewed each team member. Officer Peters stayed to monitor the situation, his presence ensuring a peaceful conclusion to their documentation session. "We'll meet at my house tonight," Callista suggested quietly. "Compare notes, make copies of everything. We need to be smart about this." Lyle nodded. "I'll bring my old K9 training manuals. There's something about Bronte's responses that seems familiar." As the group dispersed, Juniper remained with her book. Bronte had shifted positions to be as close to her as possible through the fence, his large head resting near her knee. "Good boy," she whispered, reaching through the links to scratch behind his ears. "We're going to help you, I promise." The German shepherd's tail thumped once against the ground, a gesture of trust that meant more than any documentation ever could. The morning newspaper landed on doorsteps across town with a thud that echoed through the quiet streets. "Local Child Endangers Community" blazed across the front page. Below it, a grainy photo showed Juniper near Whitmore's fence, deliberately angled to make Bronte appear menacing. Callista's hands shook as she read the article. Sources close to the situation express grave concern about parental negligence. She crumpled the paper, her face flushed with anger. "Mom?" Juniper appeared in the kitchen doorway. still in her pajamas. "Why are you mad?" Before Callista could answer, her phone buzzed with incoming messages. Neighbors, the school principal, even her boss. Outside their window, a black SUV with Elite Shield security emblazoned on its side crawled past their house for the third time that morning. "Honey, we need to talk," Callista said, pulling out a chair. "Mr. Whitmore is trying to scare us." Juniper's small fingers traced patterns on the kitchen table. "Because we're helping. Bronte?" "Yes, sweetie. He's telling lies about us, about you." The phone rang again. This time it was Lyle. "Turn on Channel 6, he said without preamble. The local news showed Whitmore standing in front of his farm, surrounded by men in security uniforms. "I've hired additional protection to ensure public safety," he announced. "We can't have children running around unsupervised, provoking dangerous animals." "That's not what happened," Juniper protested at the screen. "Bronte isn't dangerous." A knock at their door made them jump. Sarah stood there, looking apologetic. "It's getting ugly out there," she said, stepping inside. "Whitmore's security guys are stopping people on the street, warning them about a situation at the farm." "They followed me to the grocery store yesterday," Callista admitted. "Just watching." Lyle arrived next, his weathered face grim. "Classic intimidation tactics. But they're making mistakes." He spread several photos on the table. "Look at their positioning, their behavior. These aren't regular security guards. They're using military formations." Juniper studied the pictures. "Like Bronte's training?" "Exactly." Lyle pointed to specific details. "These men are ex-military or private contractors. Way too high level for simple farm security." Dr. Wong called next, her voice tight with concern. "My clinic just got a visit from the health department. Surprise inspection. They're claiming someone filed multiple complaints." "He's trying to pressure us from all sides," Sarah observed, taking notes. "But why go to such lengths over one dog?" Throughout the day, reports trickled in. The local coffee shop owner who'd supported them found his deliveries mysteriously delayed. The veterinary technician who'd helped document Bronte's injuries received parking tickets for violations that hadn't occurred. But something unexpected was happening too. Mrs. Chen from the flower shop brought over a casserole and whispered, "My son recorded those security men searching behind the farm at night. Very suspicious." The high school track coach mentioned seeing unusual late-night deliveries at Whitmore's property. The postal worker noted that certified letters arrived weekly from offshore accounts. "People are starting to see through it," Lyle explained to Juniper that afternoon as they watched Bronte from a safe distance. "Whitmore's pressure is making them look closer, ask questions." The German shepherd paced his familiar route, but Juniper noticed something new. "He always stops at that corner," she said, pointing, "and looks toward the back field." Lyle nodded approvingly. "Good eye. Dogs are creatures of pattern. When they break their pattern, it means something." They watched as Bronte completed another circuit. Again, the pause at the corner. Again, the look toward the field. "He's guarding something specific," Lyle murmured. "Something back there." A security vehicle approached, and they pretended to be walking past. The guards glared but couldn't do anything. They were on public property. That evening, their core group gathered at Callista's house again. Sarah had been busy all day, gathering statements from townspeople who'd been intimidated. "We're building a solid case," she said, organizing her notes. "Harassment, intimidation, possible business violations, but we need more." "The key is in Bronte's behavior," Lyle insisted. "He's not just a guard dog. He's a trained military-grade asset. They don't use dogs like that just to watch sheep." Dr. Wong spread out her medical documentation. "These injuries? They're consistent with intensive security training, the kind used for high-value property protection." Juniper, who'd been quietly drawing Bronte in her notebook, looked up. "He's protecting something important, Something bad. That's what we think, honey. Callista squeezed her daughter's shoulder. Which is why Mr. Whitmore is trying so hard to scare us away. A car door slammed outside. Through the window, they watched another Elite Shield vehicle drive past, its occupants taking photos of their meeting. We can't back down now, Sarah said firmly. The more he pushes, the more obvious it becomes that he's hiding something big. Juniper returned to her drawing, adding details to Bronte's watchful eyes. He's counting on us, she said simply. We promised to help him. The adults exchanged looks, humbled by her unwavering commitment. Despite the pressure, despite the fear, an 8-year-old's clear sense of right and wrong kept them focused on what mattered. Tomorrow, Lyle decided, we start mapping Bronte's patrol patterns. Every pause, every alert, every variation. The dog is trying to tell us something, and it's time we learn to listen properly. The morning sun cast long shadows across Whitmore's farm as Juniper and Lyle carefully tracked Bronte's movements. They'd been at it for hours, marking every pause and alert on a hand-drawn map. There it is again, Juniper whispered, pointing as the German shepherd stopped at the familiar corner. Bronte's ears perked forward, his nose twitching in the direction of the back field. Lyle made another note. That's the 17th time in 3 hours. Always the same spot, always the same reaction. Dr. Wong joined them, carrying her veterinary bag. I've been reviewing his medical records. The implant we found? It's military grade, used for specialized search operations. Search for what? Juniper asked, not taking her eyes off Bronte. Usually drugs, explosives, or chemicals, Lyle explained. Things that leave distinct traces in the soil. Sarah arrived next, clutching a stack of papers. You need to see this, she said, spreading out satellite photos of the property. Look at the soil patterns in that backfield. Something's been disturbed there recently. They studied the images carefully. Dark patches marked the earth where the grass grew differently, forming an unnatural rectangle. Bronte's not just guarding the property, Dr. Wong realized. He's guarding that specific spot. Juniper watched as Bronte completed another circuit. He's trying to protect something buried there. A commotion at the front gate drew their attention. 2 Elite Shield vehicles pulled up, and Whitmore himself stepped out, looking agitated. He gestured angrily at his security team. They know we're getting close, Lyle murmured. We need to move fast. That afternoon, they gathered at the local diner, away from prying eyes. The owner, Mrs. Martinez, kept watch while they planned. I had my contact at the EPA run some tests on soil samples from the drainage ditch, Sarah explained. The results showed traces of industrial chemicals, the kind that requires special permits for disposal. Expensive permits, Dr. Wong added, the kind that eat into profit margins. Callista spread out more satellite photos. Look at these shipping manifests my friend at the trucking company found. Whitmore's been receiving industrial waste from 3 states, but there's no record of proper disposal. He's been burying it, Lyle concluded, and Bronte knows exactly where. That's why he gets so aggressive when anyone gets near that field, Juniper said, understanding dawning in her eyes. He's not being mean, he's trying to keep people safe. Mrs. Martinez hurried over. Whitmore's men just pulled up outside. They quickly gathered their evidence as 2 security guards entered the diner, scanning the room. Juniper noticed how they moved, just like Lyle had described, military precision. Later that evening, they reconvened at Lyle's house. The retired K-9 officer had set up a detailed map of Whitmore's property. Based on Bronte's behavior patterns and the satellite imagery, he explained, whatever's buried is here. He pointed to a spot in the back field. And I bet it's not just chemicals. Dogs like Bronte are trained to protect documentation, too. Documentation? Callista asked. Paperwork, records, evidence, Sarah caught on, If Whitmore's been illegally dumping, he'd need to keep detailed records for his clients, proof of disposal. A paper trail? Dr. Wong nodded. No wonder he's so desperate to keep people away. Juniper studied the map. That's why Bronte stays. He knows it's dangerous, and he's trying to warn everyone. The adults exchanged looks. Everything was falling into place. The aggressive security, the intimidation tactics, the pressure to remove Bronte. We need to get to whatever's buried there, Sarah said, but legally, with witnesses and proper documentation. And we need to protect Bronte, Juniper insisted. He's been trying to help all along. Word began spreading through town, quietly at first. The barber mentioned it to his customers. The grocery clerk whispered it to regular shoppers. The story of Bronte shifted from one of danger to one of protection. Did you hear? People would say. That dog wasn't trying to hurt anyone. It was trying to save us. The next morning, they spotted several townspeople walking past Whitmore's farm, looking at Bronte with new understanding. The German Shepherd continued his patrol, steadfast in his duty, but people no longer crossed the street to avoid him. Mrs. Chen from the flower shop brought him a bowl of water, setting it just outside the fence. "Good boy," she said softly. "Such a good, brave boy." Whitmore's security teams watched helplessly as the tide of public opinion turned. They couldn't stop people from walking past, couldn't prevent them from seeing Bronte's protective behavior with new eyes. Dr. Wong documented every interaction, building a case for the dog's true nature. "Look at his body language," she pointed out to Sarah. "Classic protective posture, not aggressive territoriality. He's trying to keep people at a safe distance from whatever's buried there." "We need to coordinate with the EPA," Lyle said during their next strategy session. "Get them here with proper equipment and authority, but we have to move carefully. One wrong step and Whitmore could destroy the evidence." "Or worse," Callista added, "hurt Bronte." Juniper sat with her drawing pad, sketching the German Shepherd's alert pose. "He's not going to give up," she said confidently. "He knows his job is important." Sarah was already making calls, coordinating with environmental officials and legal experts. "We'll need witnesses, documentation of every step, multiple copies stored in different locations." The group worked late into the evening, piecing together their plan. They had to balance the urgency of exposing Whitmore's crimes with ensuring Bronte's safety and the proper handling of evidence. "Tomorrow," Lyle announced, "we start surveillance shifts, 24-hour coverage of that field. If Whitmore tries to move anything, we'll know." Through it all, Bronte maintained his vigil, protecting the truth buried in the earth. His dedication had transformed him from the town's menace to its guardian, all because one little girl had the courage to look past his fierce exterior and see his true nature. "We need a way to keep Bronte calm while we dig," Lyle explained, spreading out a detailed sketch of Whitmore's property across his kitchen table. The evening light cast long shadows through the windows as the team gathered around. Juniper traced her finger along the fence line. "I can do it. He trusts me now." Callista squeezed her daughter's shoulder. "Honey, are you sure? This could be dangerous." "Mom, Bronte's not dangerous. He's scared. And brave. Like me." Juniper's green eyes sparkled with determination. Dr. Wong nodded approvingly. "She's right. I've been observing their interactions. Juniper has a natural ability to read his body language." Sarah, the journalist, clicked her pen thoughtfully. "But we'll need more than just Juniper's connection. We need a solid plan." Lyle pulled out a diagram of typical K9 training patterns. "Here's what we know. Bronte was trained to guard specific areas, but he's also been conditioned to respond to certain commands. Like when he backs off if I sit down and talk softly," Juniper added excitedly. "Exactly," Lyle smiled. "We'll use that. But we need to be smart about this. One wrong move and Whitmore's security could spot us. They spent the next hour plotting their approach. Mrs. Martinez offered to park her food truck near the property line, a natural distraction that wouldn't raise suspicion since she often served Whitmore's workers lunch. "I'll bring extra treats," she winked at Juniper. "Special ones that Dr. Wong says are safe for dogs." Dr. Wong pulled out her medical kit. "I've got mild sedative treats, just in case. But I agree with Juniper. Force should be our last resort." The next morning, they put their plan into action. Mrs. Martinez parked her food truck at the usual spot, the smell of fresh tamales wafting through the air. Several of Whitmore's security guards wandered over, just as expected. Juniper sat cross-legged near the fence, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. Bronte watched her intently, his ears perked forward. "Hi, boy," she said softly, pulling out her sketchbook. "Want to see what I drew? It's you, being brave." The German Shepherd's tail gave a slight wag. He'd grown used to her voice, her presence. She began humming quietly, a technique Lyle had suggested based on his canine experience. While Juniper kept Bronte's attention, Lyle and Sarah carefully made their way around the property's edge. They carried simple gardening tools, nothing that would raise alarm if spotted. "That's right," Juniper continued, her voice steady and calm. "You're such a good boy. You've been protecting everyone, haven't you?" Bronte's posture relaxed slightly. He moved closer to the fence, drawn by her gentle words and familiar presence. Dr. Wong, watching from her parked car, gave the signal. 2 quick flashes of her headlights. The security guards were fully distracted by Mrs. Martinez's lunch special. Lyle and Sarah reached the spot they'd identified. They moved carefully, using small hand tools to avoid noise. Juniper kept talking, her voice carrying just enough to mask any small sounds they made. "Remember when I first met you?" she asked Bronte. "Everyone thought you were scary, but I knew better. You were just doing your job, weren't you?" The dog's tail wagged more freely now. He'd settled into a sitting position, his fierce guard dog demeanor softening under Juniper's gentle attention. "Look what I brought you." She pulled out a special treat from her pocket, one Dr. Wong had approved. She held it up, letting Bronte see it clearly. "But you have to stay right here with me, okay?" Behind her, Lyle's careful digging had revealed the edge of something solid. Sarah documented everything with her phone, keeping the camera hidden from view. Suddenly, Bronte's ears twitched. A car door slammed in the distance. Juniper didn't miss a beat. "Want to hear a story?" she asked quickly, pulling out another sketch. "This is about a brave dog who saved an entire town. Remind you of anyone?" The German Shepherd's attention returned to her, drawn by her calm energy and steady voice. She had learned to read his subtle signals, the tilt of his ears, the tension in his shoulders, the position of his tail. "You're not alone anymore," she continued softly. "We understand now. We're going to help you do your job, but in a better way." Lyle and Sarah worked efficiently, their movements practiced from hours of planning. The crate was slowly becoming visible, but they needed more time. Juniper noticed Bronte's nose twitch. He'd caught a scent. Without missing a beat, she pulled out another treat, using it to guide his attention back to her. "Such a good boy," she praised. "So smart and strong. But you don't have to do this all by yourself anymore." The dog's brown eyes locked with hers, showing a depth of understanding that still amazed everyone who witnessed their connection. Where others had seen only aggression, Juniper had recognized intelligence and purpose. Mrs. Martinez's voice carried across the property, offering the security guards fresh coffee with their lunch. The timing was perfect, keeping them occupied just long enough for Lyle to secure the crate's position. Dr. Wong gave another signal. 3 quick flashes this time. They'd found what they were looking for. "Good job, Bronte," Juniper said earnestly. "You did it. You kept everyone safe until we could help. That's what heroes do." The German Shepherd's entire demeanor had transformed during their interaction. His previously rigid posture had softened, his eyes bright with intelligence rather than threat. He stayed focused on Juniper, trusting her presence even as Lyle and Sarah carefully withdrew from the site. They had done it, located the evidence without triggering any alarms or aggressive responses. And they had done it not through force or trickery, but through understanding and patience, led by an 8-year-old girl who had seen truth where others saw only danger. Back at Lyle's workshop, the team gathered around a weathered wooden table. The recovered crate sat before them, its contents carefully laid out. Sarah clicked away with her camera, documenting every piece of evidence. "Look at these dates," Dr. Wong said, pointing to a stack of shipping manifests. 3 years of illegal chemical disposal, all carefully documented. Juniper sat cross-legged on a sturdy chair, Bronte lying contentedly at her feet. The German Shepherd had refused to leave her side since they'd recovered the crate, as if sharing in their victory. "That's why you were so protective," Juniper whispered to Bronte, scratching behind his ears. "You knew how important these papers were." Mrs. Martinez spread out several maps on the table. "These show all the dumping sites," she explained, tracing lines with her finger. "No, wonder the creek water's been looking strange lately." Lyle studied the documents with practiced eyes. "This is more than enough for the Environmental Protection Agency. Whitmore won't be able to talk his way out of this one." The afternoon sun streamed through dusty workshop windows, catching dust motes in golden beams. Outside, birds chirped peacefully, a stark contrast to the tension of the morning's operation. "We should call a town meeting," Sarah suggested, reviewing the photos on her camera. "Everyone needs to see this evidence for themselves." Callista, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "The community center would be perfect. Most people are still talking about Juniper's video anyway. They'll come just out of curiosity." Bronte's tail thumped steadily against the floor. The change in him was remarkable. Without the burden of guarding Whitmore's secrets, his natural intelligence and loyalty shone through. "Mayor Thompson needs to see this first," Lyle said, carefully organizing the papers. "She'll want to handle this officially." The group worked methodically, sorting and cataloging every document. They found permits with forged signatures, falsified environmental reports, and detailed records of chemical shipments that never officially existed. Juniper watched the adults work, feeling proud but also relieved. She'd known all along that Bronte wasn't bad. He just needed someone to understand him. "Hey, look at this," Sarah called out, holding up a document. "It's Bronte's original training certificate. He was a highly decorated security dog before Whitmore got hold of him." Dr. Wong examined the paper. "That explains his advanced training. He was protecting those documents because that's exactly what he was trained to do." The German Shepherd's ears perked up at his name. Juniper hugged him gently. "You were doing your job perfectly," she told him. "Just like I knew you would." The workshop buzzed with energy as more townspeople began arriving, drawn by careful phone calls and discreet messages. Each new arrival gasped at the sight of Juniper sitting calmly with the once feared dog. "I can't believe it," Mrs. Peterson from the grocery store whispered. "That dog used to terrify everyone who walked past the farm." "Because he was protecting something important," Juniper explained, her voice clear and confident. "He was never mean. He was being brave." The evidence spoke for itself. As more people examined the documents, the mood shifted from skepticism to determination. The truth about Whitmore's activities could no longer be ignored. Mayor Thompson arrived just before sunset, her face growing increasingly serious as she reviewed the evidence. "This changes everything," she declared. "We'll need to act quickly." Bronte stayed close to Juniper throughout the evening, his presence a steady reminder of how understanding and patience could overcome fear. The same townspeople who had once demanded his removal now watched, in amazement, as he gently accepted treats from Juniper's hand. "We'll hold the town meeting tomorrow morning," Mayor Thompson announced. "Every resident needs to know what's been happening on that farm." The team carefully packed away the documents, making multiple copies for safety. Their success felt both surprising and inevitable, as if Juniper's faith in Bronte had somehow made everything possible. "You did it, sweetheart," Callista said, hugging her daughter. "You saw the truth when nobody else could." Juniper smiled, watching Bronte's relaxed posture and bright eyes. "We all did it together," she corrected. "And Bronte helped us the whole time." The German Shepherd's transformation was the most visible proof of their success. Where once stood a snarling guard dog, now sat a loyal and intelligent companion, his true nature finally free to shine through. The celebration at the workshop was cut short by the sound of tires crunching on gravel. Through the window, dark SUVs pulled up, their headlights cutting through the early evening shadows. "That's Whitmore's security team," Lyle warned, his body tensing. "Everyone grab the documents, now!" Juniper felt Bronte stiffen beside her, a low growl rumbling in his chest. The German Shepherd's ears flattened against his head as heavy boots thundered up the workshop steps. The door burst open with a crash. 3 men in tactical gear stormed in, their faces hard and mean. Behind them, Whitmore appeared, his usual polished appearance replaced by barely contained rage. "Those documents are private property," he snarled. "Hand them over." "They're evidence of your crimes," Mayor Thompson shot back, but her voice shook slightly. Chaos erupted. The security team charged forward, shoving people aside. Papers scattered across the floor like leaves in a storm. Bronte barked furiously, caught between his old training to obey the security team and his new loyalty to Juniper. "Run!" Lyle shouted, trying to block the men's path. "Get the evidence out of here!" Juniper clutched the original documents to her chest and bolted for the back door, Bronte at her heels. Behind her she heard crashes and shouts as the adults tried to stop Whitmore's men. The evening air hit her face as she ran across the yard toward the woods. She knew these trails. She'd explored them 100 times. But in the growing darkness, the familiar paths looked strange and threatening. Heavy footsteps pounded behind her. "Stop that, kid!" Whitmore's voice boomed. Juniper's heart hammered in her chest as she scrambled down a steep trail. Loose rocks skittered under her feet. To her right, a deep ravine dropped away into darkness. Bronte whined, moving carefully beside her. A hand grabbed her jacket. One of the security men had caught up. Juniper twisted away, but her foot slipped on the loose ground. She felt herself falling toward the ravine. Bronte froze, his training commanding him to help the security team, but his eyes locked on Juniper. The conflict was visible in every line of his body. "Bronte!" Juniper cried out as she slid further down the slope. Her fall was stopped by a fallen tree, but the impact knocked the wind from her lungs. The massive trunk pinned her legs, trapping her at the edge of the ravine. The precious documents scattered, some falling into the darkness below. "Got you now?" the security man growled, advancing toward her. Juniper struggled to free herself, but the tree was too heavy. Panic rose in her throat as the man got closer. Where was everyone? Where was her mom? Bronte still hadn't moved, caught in his internal battle. His ears flicked back and forth, responding to commands that had been drilled into him, and the pull of his heart toward Juniper. "Help!" Juniper's voice echoed off the ravine walls. Pain shot through her legs as she tried to pull free. The security man reached for her. In that moment, Bronte's hesitation shattered. With a fierce bark that echoed through the trees, he charged forward, positioning himself between Juniper and the threat. But they were still outnumbered. 2 more security men appeared on the trail, moving to surround them. Bronte couldn't watch all sides at once, and Juniper was still trapped. "You've caused enough trouble." Whitmore appeared at the top of the trail, his face twisted with anger. "That dog should have been put down weeks ago." Tears streaked Juniper's face as she pulled uselessly at her trapped legs. The tree seemed to grow heavier with each attempt to free herself. Far below, she could hear the creek rushing over rocks, a reminder of how close the edge was. The security team closed in, their boots sending more rocks tumbling into the ravine. Bronte's growl grew deeper, more threatening, but even his impressive presence couldn't hold back 3 trained men. This was the moment when everything could go wrong. All their work, all their discoveries, might end here in the growing darkness beside a lonely ravine. Juniper felt the weight of it all pressing down as heavily as the tree that trapped her. The security men lunged forward all at once. Bronte's muscles tensed, his training screaming at him to stand down, but something stronger pulled at his heart. In that split second, as Juniper's frightened cry pierced the air, the German shepherd made his choice. With explosive power, he charged the nearest man, knocking him backwards. The security guard's baton swung down, catching Bronte across his shoulder. Blood matted his fur, but he didn't back down. Years of harsh conditioning tried to force him to submit to the armed men, but Juniper's presence gave him strength to fight back. "Get that mutt under control," Whitmore shouted from his safe distance. Through tear-blurred eyes, Juniper watched Bronte take on all 3 men. He darted between them, keeping them away from her, his powerful jaws snapping at their hands when they got too close. But she could see the wound on his shoulder getting worse, his movements becoming slower. "Please, someone help!" she screamed, her voice raw with desperation. Bronte's ears twitched at her cry. In a sudden burst of speed, he broke away from the guards and ran to her side. His amber eyes met hers, full of intelligence and determination. He dug his paws into the loose soil and began to work at the tree, pinning her legs. "Stop that dog," Whitmore commanded, but his men hesitated, having seen Bronte's fierce protection. The German shepherd's powerful jaws clamped onto the tree trunk. Muscles straining, he pulled with all his might. Blood dripped from his shoulder wound, but he didn't stop. Juniper felt the pressure on her legs lessening as Bronte somehow managed to shift the massive trunk just enough. "I can almost move," she gasped, wiggling her feet. Bronte redoubled his efforts, ignoring the security men who were regrouping. With a final tremendous heave, he created just enough space. Juniper pulled her legs free, crying out at the pins and needle sensation that flooded them. But they weren't safe yet. The security team moved in again, this time with steel resolve in their eyes. Bronte positioned himself over Juniper, who was still struggling to stand on her shaky legs. His warning growl echoed off the ravine walls. "Juniper!" A familiar voice cut through the tension. Callista's frantic call came from further up the trail. "Mom, we're down here!" Juniper shouted back. Footsteps thundered down the path. Lyle appeared first, his face red from running but his movements steady and purposeful. Callista was right behind him, along with 2 police officers they'd called when the violence started. "Step away from the child," one officer commanded, drawing his weapon. "These men attacked us," Juniper pointed at the security team. "Bronte saved me. He pulled me out from under the tree when I was trapped." Lyle moved closer, his experienced eyes taking in the scene. "Look at the dog's wound. Look at how he's protecting her. This isn't an aggressive animal. This is a trained guard dog choosing to defend an innocent child instead of following corrupt orders. The security team backed away, their confidence faltering as they realized how the situation appeared. Whitmore's face had gone pale. "That dog is dangerous," he started to say, but Callista cut him off. "That dog just saved my daughter's life." She rushed to Juniper, wrapping her in a tight embrace. "While your men were the ones who put her in danger." Bronte stayed close to Juniper and Callista, but his posture had changed. Instead of the snarling menace everyone had feared, he now showed the noble bearing of a protective guardian. Despite his injury, he stood tall, his loyalty unmistakable. The police officers moved to detain Whitmore's security team, who surrendered without resistance. Lyle knelt beside Bronte, gently examining his wound. "It's deep, but he'll be okay with proper treatment," he assured them. "He's one brave dog. All this time, people thought he was a monster, but look at him now!" Juniper buried her face in Bronte's thick fur, careful to avoid his injury. "You saved me," she whispered. "You chose me over everything they taught you." Tears streamed down Callista's face as she watched her daughter with the dog everyone had warned them about. "I'm so sorry I ever doubted you, honey. You saw what we all missed." More police cars arrived, their lights painting the darkening woods in flashes of red and blue. As officers led Whitmore away, Bronte watched calmly, no longer triggered by the presence of uniforms and weapons. His conditioning had been broken by something stronger, the pure trust of a child who had believed in him. The remaining scattered documents were collected, adding to the evidence they'd already secured. But the most powerful proof of Whitmore's corruption was the wounded dog who had finally broken free of his control. Lyle helped Juniper stand, while Bronte stayed pressed against her leg. "We need to get you both checked out," he said gently. "You'll have some bruises from that tree, and Bronte needs stitches. But you're going to be okay. Both of you." The small group made their way back up the trail, moving carefully in the growing darkness. Bronte limped slightly but remained attentive, his ears swiveling to track any sounds in the woods. But his fearsome snarl was gone, replaced by the steady watchfulness of a trusted protector. "Good boy," Juniper kept whispering, her hand resting on his uninjured shoulder. "Good boy, Bronte." At the police station, Juniper sat between her mother and Lyle, her small fingers absently tracing the bandages on her legs. Through the window, she could see Bronte resting comfortably in the back of the animal control van, his shoulder freshly stitched and bandaged. The veterinarian had insisted on staying with him, monitoring his condition. Detective Sarah Martinez spread the recovered documents across her desk, her forehead creasing as she examined each page. "This is more than just illegal dumping," she said, shuffling through photographs and ledgers. "We're looking at years of environmental violations, falsified records, and evidence tampering." Callista squeezed Juniper's hand. "And assault," she added firmly. "Those men could have killed my daughter." "We have that all on record too," Detective Martinez nodded, gesturing to a laptop showing footage from multiple phones. Neighbors had filmed the entire confrontation from the safety of their properties. "Mr. Whitmore won't be able to talk his way out of this one." Through the station's glass divider, they could see Whitmore sitting in the interview room, his usual confidence completely deflated. His security team had already turned on him, eager to make deals in exchange for lighter sentences. Animal Control Officer Jenkins entered the room, looking considerably more humble than he had during his earlier demands for Bronte's removal. "I've reviewed the K-9 training. Records Lyle uncovered," he said, clearing his throat. "That dog wasn't born aggressive. He was deliberately conditioned using some pretty questionable methods. With proper rehabilitation, he could be an exceptional companion animal." "He already is," Juniper spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. He chose to help me even though it hurt him. That's what good dogs do." Jenkins nodded, a slight flush coloring his cheeks. "You were right about him, young lady. We were wrong to jump to conclusions without investigating properly." Outside, a small crowd had gathered. News of the morning's events had spread quickly through the town. Many faces that had once shown fear or criticism now displayed shame and regret. Mrs. Peterson, who had been one of the loudest voices calling for Bronte's removal, approached Callista as they finally left the station. "I owe you and your daughter an apology," she said, wringing her hands. "We all let fear cloud our judgment. That brave dog saved Juniper's life, and we nearly—" Her voice trailed off. Callista's expression softened. "We all make mistakes," she said. "What matters is learning from them." The veterinarian emerged from the van, giving everyone a thumbs up. "Bronte's doing great. The wound was clean, and he's responding well to treatment. He's got an amazing temperament considering everything he's been through." Juniper broke away from her mother and ran to the van's back doors. Bronte's tail thumped against the floor when he saw her, his amber eyes bright and alert despite the pain medication. "The rehabilitation center has already agreed to take him," Lyle announced, joining them. "But they'll need someone to visit regularly, help him adjust, work with the trainers." He gave Juniper a meaningful look. "Really?" Juniper's face lit up. She turned to her mother. "Mom, can we?" Callista laughed, shaking her head in amazement. "After everything that's happened, how could I say no? But," she added seriously, "we follow all the safety protocols. No shortcuts." "Of course," Juniper beamed. "Bronte wants to learn how to be a regular dog, don't you, boy?" The German Shepherd's tail wagged harder, and he made a soft whining sound that made everyone smile. Mayor Thompson arrived, looking flustered. "I've called an emergency town council meeting," he announced. "We need to address the environmental impact of Whitmore's dumping, but also—" He paused, looking at Juniper. "We need to formally acknowledge that sometimes the youngest among us see things more clearly than we do." Detective Martinez emerged from the station. "Whitmore's being processed now," she reported. "We've got multiple agencies involved, given the scope of his crimes. He won't be walking away from this one." Juniper wasn't really listening to the adults anymore. She sat cross-legged by the van's doors, talking softly to Bronte about all the things they would do together once he was better. The dog listened intently, his scarred ears pricked, forward, accepting gentle scratches through the grate. Lyle watched them with satisfaction. "You know," he said to Callista, "in all my years working with K9 units, I've rarely seen such a natural connection. Your daughter has a gift." Callista nodded, tears pricking her eyes. "She's always seen straight to the heart of things. I should have trusted that more from the beginning." "You supported her when it mattered most," Lyle assured her. "That's what counts." The crowd continued to grow as more townspeople arrived, many bringing get-well offerings for both Juniper and Bronte. The atmosphere had transformed from one of fear and suspicion to celebration and relief. Children who had once crossed the street to avoid Whitmore's property now asked their parents if they could visit Bronte at the rehabilitation center. Jenkins approached with some paperwork. "We'll need signatures for the rehabilitation program," he explained. "And—" He hesitated, then continued, "We'd like to document this case properly. It could help change how we approach similar situations in the future." Callista signed the forms, while Juniper continued her one-sided conversation with Bronte, planning their future together. The dog's entire demeanor had changed, as if a great weight had been lifted from his powerful shoulders. His eyes, once filled with defensive fury, now showed only warmth and devotion when he looked at the small girl who had believed in him. The veterinarian prepared to transport Bronte to the rehabilitation center. "He'll need a few weeks to heal physically," she explained. But I have a feeling the emotional rehabilitation will go much faster, thanks to his new friend. Juniper stood up reluctantly. I'll visit tomorrow, she promised Bronte. And the next day, and the next day. As the van pulled away, Callista wrapped her arm around her daughter's shoulders. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. You stood up for what you believed in, even when everyone else doubted you. I just knew he was good inside, Juniper said simply. He just needed someone to see it. 2 months later, Juniper sat in the grass outside the rehabilitation center, watching Bronte run through basic obedience drills with his trainer. The German Shepherd's coat gleamed in the sunlight, his movements fluid and confident. The deep wound on his flank had healed to a thin scar, barely visible beneath his thick fur. Look at him go, Callista said, settling beside her daughter with a thermos of hot chocolate. Remember when people used to cross the street to avoid him? Juniper grinned. Now they ask if they can pet him. She accepted a steaming cup from her mother. Ms. Rodriguez even wants him to visit the elementary school for her presentation on animal safety. Bronte finished his drill and trotted over, tail wagging. He flopped down beside Juniper, resting his head on her lap. His amber eyes, once filled with fury and fear, now held only warmth and trust. Good boy, Juniper whispered, scratching behind his scarred ears. You showed everyone who you really are. Lyle approached from the parking lot, carrying a manila envelope. Well, it's official, he announced. The judge signed off on everything. Bronte's cleared for adoption, and Whitmore's going away for a long time. How long? Callista asked. 20 years, minimum. The environmental charges alone? Lyle shook his head. Plus endangering a minor, assault, conspiracy. The list goes on. His whole operation's been shut down. Juniper hugged Bronte closer. He can't hurt anyone anymore. The trainer, Sarah, joined them with her clipboard. Bronte's progress is remarkable, she reported. His aggressive responses have been completely reconditioned. He's still protective, but now he channels it appropriately. She smiled at Juniper. Having you here 3 times a week has made all the difference. When can he come home with us? Juniper asked, trying not to sound too eager. Next week, Sarah replied. We just need to finish the home assessment and paperwork. Callista laughed at her daughter's delighted expression. Our little apartment's going to feel pretty full with a dog his size. Actually, Lyle cleared his throat. I've been meaning to talk to you about that. The town council's decided to convert Whitmore's property into a community training center for rescue dogs. They're looking for an on-site manager, someone with experience in both animal care and administration. Callista's eyes widened. Are you suggesting... The position comes with the renovated farmhouse, Lyle continued. Plenty of room for a growing girl and a big dog. Plus, there's talk of starting a youth program, teaching kids about animal care and rehabilitation. Juniper bounced up and down, causing Bronte to lift his head in curiosity. Mom, please, it would be perfect. It would be a big change, Callista said slowly, but her eyes were bright with possibility. Sometimes big changes are exactly what we need, Lyle observed. This whole experience has changed the town for the better. People are more willing to look beneath the surface, to question their assumptions. Bronte sat up suddenly, alert but calm, as Mayor Thompson's car pulled into the parking lot. The mayor had become a regular visitor, fascinated by the rehabilitation process and determined to make amends for his initial rush to judgment. I brought lunch, he called out, holding up several takeout bags. Thought we could celebrate the good news about Whitmore's sentencing. They spread out a picnic blanket, and Bronte settled at Juniper's side, accepting gentle pats from everyone. The fear that had once surrounded him had transformed into admiration and respect. You know, the mayor said between bites, this whole situation has taught me something important. Sometimes it takes a child's perspective to see the truth clearly. We adults get so caught up in our preconceptions. Juniper saw Bronte's heart, Callista said proudly, when the rest of us only saw danger. She saw mine too, Lyle added quietly. I was ready to retire completely, withdraw from everything. Then this determined 8-year-old pulled me back into the world. Juniper leaned against her mother, suddenly shy at all the praise. Bronte pressed closer, offering silent support as he always did now. I just did what felt right, she said simply. That's what makes it special. Callista kissed the top of her daughter's head. You trusted your heart, even when everyone else doubted. You showed us all what real courage looks like. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the training yard as they finished their lunch. Bronte dozed peacefully, no longer the feared Hellion, but a loyal companion who had found his true purpose. The transformation went beyond just the dog. It had touched everyone involved, rippling out through the community in waves of positive change. Sarah approached with Bronte's leash. Time for one more training session before closing, she announced. Would you like to lead him through it, Juniper? Juniper jumped up eagerly. Bronte followed, fully attentive but relaxed, matching his pace to hers. Together they walked toward the training area. Their shadows merged into one, a small girl and a large dog, bound by trust and understanding. You know, Callista said softly, watching them go, when she first touched him through that cage, I was terrified. Now I can't imagine our lives without him. That's the power of compassion, Lyle replied. It transforms everything it touches. The mayor nodded in agreement. And sometimes the smallest hands can make the biggest changes,